Hello and welcome to Team PokeMart, your one-stop shop for things that you need to stop and or shop for. And today, valued customers, it just so happens to be National Remember Things About How Pokemon Used to Be Day. A very strange holiday celebrated only within the Kanto region because no other region actually cares about the good old days of 151 Pokemon. And to be fair, why should they? With upstanding specimens such as Stunfisk, Burmy, and Blipblug, who even wants to remember Charizard, Dragonite, and Mewtwo? Not me, that's for sure. And you know what? This may even come as a shock to you, but did you know that Generation 1 had even worse Pokemon than those three, especially in the games? Some of the sprites were absolute abominations and only really classifiable as art from a technical standpoint. Because as far as I'm aware, the purpose of art, at least in galleries and such, is to generate some kind of emotional response, and wow, some of these sprites sure do elicit that. So to celebrate our bizarre Kanto national holiday, during which I still have to work, but instead of doing work, we will be going through the top 10 worst sprites of Generation 1. Which, to be clear, means that we will be considering 3 incarnations of the games, being the original Japanese Pokemon Green and Red, then of course the more familiar and slightly updated Red and Blue, and then the game nobody asked for but received anyway, starting a disturbing trend of reselling games, Pokemon Yellow. All 3 incarnations have radically different sprites, and one of my favorites is exclusive to Pokemon Red, being the earliest known subscribe button for Team PokeMart, the pressing of which will keep you up to date on all of our latest stock, and yes, it still works to this very day. So go ahead and press it in an attempt to briefly distract you from the rather cursed images you're about to see. Because at number 10 we are starting off strong with Charizard from the Green and Red editions. Quite possibly one of the most objectively coolest Pokemon of all time, although you'd never know that from his appearance here, where he seems more like an awkward dragon tapping his feet to a beat that exists only within its incredibly derpy head. And I guess that's the thing that really gets to me about this Charizard. It lacks absolutely everything that subsequent Charizards would bring to the table, usually going on to appear with a strong attitude, be it angry or arrogant, but it does make an impression. Whereas if my opponent were to send out this Charizard against me in battle, well, I would immediately begin to question their mental integrity, both the Charizard and the trainer. And yeah, look, value customer, this sprite isn't that bad. It only looks slightly weird in comparison to Red and Blue, although its yellow counterpart, well, that is peak Charizard. This is only the beginning though. Things are about to get much stranger, with number 9 being Cloyster from Red and Blue. Now, it might not be immediately apparent, but there is something very, very wrong with this Cloyster. What could it be? I suppose it would be because it appears to have fallen on its side and not be able to get up. Although judging by its face, Cloyster has now made peace with its new horizontal existence. And this is one of those funny situations, because if we look at the sprite from Green and Red, the games that came before this one, Cloyster is actually the right way up. How about that? And if I had to guess as to why this was the case, I'd say that's because the original Cloyster looks remarkably similar to certain, how shall we say, lady parts. Cloyster certainly is whatever the opposite of phallic is. Vagalic? I'm pretty sure that's the word. But whatever the case, the Red and Blue sprite is a pure aberration because it was immediately rectified in Pokemon Yellow, making the Red and Blue Cloyster a very awkward middle child in this initial generation. With that said, it is certainly less awkward than number 8, being Slowbro from Pokemon Yellow. So I'd say that Yellow overall has the much better set of sprites, much more refined and such, but that doesn't stop them from crafting strange creatures from time to time. Like this Slowbro, who looks like he is either preparing for or currently engaged in a rectal exam, and judging by the look on his face, he is almost certainly not enjoying it. And I suppose with this newfound canon in mind, it would be the shelter on Slowbro's tail that is administering the examination, or an alternative situation where what's happened is Slowbro has dropped his house keys on the floor and is struggling to pick them up. And yeah, look, I know, it's a Slowbro, but even this Slowbro looks especially slow. Even the Red and Blue version where he appears to be eating his own shell tail appears to be more on top of things than his yellow cousin. In this situation though, I actually think the best Slowbro sprite came from Green and Red, and throughout these games it just got worse and worse until we ended up with this marvel of rectal nature. It's okay, Slowbro, we're all just as concerned as you are. But for now we move on to number 7, which is Kabuto from Red and Blue. And I suppose we should start this one with a bit of a personal story, because when I performed my first playthrough of Pokemon as a youngling, roughly 5 or 6 decades ago at this point, I quite eagerly chose the Dome Fossil because Kabuto was one of my favorite Pokemon at the time. Yes, it was a very weird phase. Cut to resurrecting this lad into my party, and I found that this was not the Kabuto I was looking for. For whatever reason, the design team of Red and Blue decided that no, we don't don't need to see Kabuto's face, a bird's eye shot will do just fine. And thus Kabuto becomes the only Pokemon across all Generation 1 games whose face we cannot see, with the exception of Staryu and Starmie, who do not have faces. Kabuto does though, and the annoying thing is they had it so right in Green and Red. There was nothing about this Kabuto that needed changing, and I think the designers agreed, because in Pokemon Yellow they pretty much just readopted the same sprite. But whatever was going on in Red and Blue, someone screwed up, although probably not quite as much as number 6, which is Ekans from Green and Red. And you know, I really don't think that snakes are all that difficult to get right. And you know who agrees with me on this? Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow. They all seem to have really nailed the idea of a fearsome snake, but in the Green and Red versions they opted to make Ekans look like a derpy sock puppet. Hello, I'm Ekans, and my mouth is bigger than my head, is what this Ekans would say perpetually if it did indeed exist. In fact, you know what? I'd say it looks much less like an Ekans and significantly more like a Weepinbell and an Ekans engaged in intercourse and produced this hellspawn. But the problem is Weepinbell gets away with its thick, derpy fish lips because this thing is just, well, it's 100% weird, so you can't really hold that against it. Whereas Snekans, whose name is Ekans, which is snake backwards, which is why my mind just called it Snekans, is fairly grounded, at least aesthetically. Still, weirdly enough, I kind of prefer this Ekans to number 5, which is Gengar, also from Green and Red. So the Generation 1 games really do take us on a grand journey of the development of Gengar, but let's do it backwards. Here's Gengar from Pokemon Yellow, a fierce, scary ghost boy with a hint of practical jokester. This is the perfect Gengar. Now going back in incarnation, we have Red and Blue's Gengar, and he certainly lost a lot of the flair he had in Yellow, much less intimidating, but still a mildly acceptable visualization of Gengar. Meanwhile, his original sprite had nothing but a large sack of ghost crap standing and smiling awkwardly like me in any given social situation. And perhaps that's why I despise this Gengar so much, because it hits a little bit too close to home. But really compare this Gengar to literally any other image of the famous ghost and tell me that this is the superior version. I really cannot believe that this is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Oh, how far you've come, Gengar. But to erase this from my mind, we now have the truly bizarre number 4, which is Wigglytuff, also from Green and Red. And man, has this Wigglytuff seen some traumatic things. It's the exact same look I now have on my face after having seen this Wigglytuff. And I don't really know where to begin. I'm assuming with some sort of hard narcotics, because this thing is tripping hard, and I'm assuming the designer was as well. When I first saw this alleged Wigglytuff, I actually thought that it was wearing a monocle or something until the cold, hard reality set in, and I realized that that was just an unnaturally large eye. And the longer I looked into these eyes, the deeper into the void I went, traveling through this vapid space of sheer emptiness that I suppose very much reflects the soul of this Wigglytuff. It looks like even it does not know why it exists. But while we're here, I also want to give an honorable mention to Green and Red Jigglypuff, who looks similarly drugged up, just staring off into space like that. And come to think of it, they don't get all that much better in Red and Blue, but Wigglytuff is well and truly fixed, and the two become much more solid in Yellow. But Wigglytuff was certainly not the only thing in need of fixing here, because unfortunately, number 3 also exists, and it is Koffing from Red and Blue. And here is another one of my Kabuto-style disappointments as a child. It's not something I immediately picked up on, but Koffing just did not feel like Koffing, and as a result, I did not feel like using Koffing. As is becoming a bit of a trend though, it's interesting to note that Green and Red absolutely nailed Koffing's design. I mean, just look at this jolly boy. And then they took that and turned it into this. Thankfully, Yellow corrected this egregious error against life, but poor Koffing had to spend his entire Red and Blue career with a giant forehead instead of a bountiful poisonous belly, and I will never forgive someone for that. You, I won't forgive you specifically. Yes, you, the one watching the video, I blame you. And I also blame you for number 2, which is Geodude, also from Red and Blue. And here we have a very similar scenario to the whole Koffing situation, where Geodude has its facial features smushed into like the bottom of its rock head body. But the difference here is that this was also the design from Green and Red. However, there's just something so pathetic about Geodude's spaghetti arm in Red and Blue. Although to be fair, I suppose it does give him quite a range of sass, but it isn't exactly the fearsome muscled rock creature that I was trained into enjoying by the anime. And also just the fact that Geodude looks so confident, because he shouldn't. Nobody who looks like this Geodude should be confident. Unless of course you're comparing yourself to our number 1 contender today, which is Mew from Green and Red. Mew is undoubtedly one of the most adorable Pokemon of all time, adorable yet terrifying due to its immense power. Whereas I would say this Mew is the missing link between Mew and Mewtwo, another failed experiment which, instead of producing a theoretical Ditto, actually got a bit closer and formed itself into a Hunchback Mew. And no, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just that in comparison to how refined, sleek, and generally beautiful Mew became, this is pretty monstrous in retrospect. And there's something about it that just gives me much weirder vibes than all of the other weird vibe generating sprites we've gone through. Mew just looks so uncomfortable. And you know, as much as I despise green and red Gengar, at least he looks mildly more comfortable than this. So please do avert your gaze as we crown green and red Mew as the #1 worst sprite of Generation 1. And now please do refocus your gaze on me, Team PokeMart Manager, because you've made it through another wonderful video, and I'm sure you're all thirsty after all of that eye watching. So please do feel free to empty the full contents of your wallet directly onto the counter, and I shall fetch for you, valued customer, a can of Wiggly Juice, guaranteed to, let's just say it's an experience. But please do make sure to stop by Team PokeMart and say hi, which you can do in the comments below, and if you're interested in some of our other merchandise, then please do click these tantalizing links over here, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for regular updates on our new stock. But for now, this has been Team PokeMart, and we'll see you next time.